Okay, so we're recording, and now I'm going to try to share if I can talk myself into not being too stupid. Right there, I believe. Yes, share it. Jesus, I just clicked it. There we go. And you guys should see the PowerShell splash screen right here for my editor.
Yep.
Okay, beautiful. All right. So today we are going to get really, really cool. I hope I'm not jumping too far ahead for all of you, but that's what questions are for. And let me warn you that this is a difficult topic, and it's going to take a little while to get your mind around. But today we're going to start writing our own classes. So as we know, everything in PowerShell is an object. And those objects are created by classes. In this case, they're going to be, in PowerShell's case, they're going to be C#. But everything we do, and there's a difference between classes and functions, right? Because a function does a single thing. A class will help you organize different functions for the same thing, right? So if we have, let's say, A equals I hate to keep using this as an example, but whatever. So A, and I'm going to pull a GM on this, and I've got these methods and properties. Everybody knows that. We've got overloads, we've got everything. So you can work with this specific object, this type of object, in many different ways, right? This is all the info we can get on it. These are all the things we can do with it. But if these things were all, separate functions, they'd be really hard to remember and really hard to discern in code, because when they're all separate objects, you don't know that they're all tied to the same thing, right? So with this one, you can say a dot service handle, a dot display name, a dot stop, a dot pause, right? You can do all of that stuff to it, and all of that stuff belongs to something that you've instantiated as A. But if it were just pause service, and then you had to pass it in a service name, and then display name for service, and you had to pass that in, and then service type, and you had to pass that in, and so on, it starts getting really laborious, right? And it kind of defeats the purpose of having objects, doesn't it? So we're going to create our own objects as classes today. And the syntax here is really close to C#. There are some big differences, but nothing that's going to bite us in the butt right away, right? And I'll point out some shortcomings and some misgivings and whatnot as we go along. And we're gonna really do the basics today, and then we're gonna build on this class. So what I've decided to do is take this function, this list of functions that I've given you guys for connecting to SQL, and we're going to turn that into a SQL connection class. So something that's going to be really useful. And as we go through this, you're going to see the advantages. You're not going to see them right away, but you will see the advantages eventually. But right now, we're concerned really with syntax and theory and reasons and stuff like that, right? So let's talk about classes real quick. I mean, I know you guys have seen this before, but if I were to say, because I did this just now, right? I set A equal to get service. So what if I had a where clause in here? If I packed this to a where clause to only get the SQL services, that would fill A with only the SQL services, right? Does everybody agree?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So now if I turned around and did B with get service for everything that started with V, I would get volume, I would get the volume shadow copy service and some other stuff, right? So I'd get everything that started with a V. Now if I print A to the screen, will it give me any of the ones that have the V? No, it'll just give me the SQL services, right? So both of these are two different instances of the class, right? I've instantiated two different instances of the class. Does that make sense? So it's like I really like to think of it as like an assembly line for cars, right? Because everybody likes to say cars, everybody likes to use cars as an example for classes. But the assembly line, if one car doesn't pass the test and has to be basically thrown away, is the one behind it in the same boat? No. They're individual cars. Each one of them are individual cars. Even though they're exactly the same mechanically, they have all of the exact same components, they are individual cars. And that's what we mean when we say instantiate a class, is I am setting up an instance of this class with its own unique properties and its own unique settings and its own unique data, and I can have another instance of a class with its own settings and data and whatnot and memory space and all of that stuff, right? So I could have two different SQL connections going with the same class. I just have two different instances of that class. One of them could be pointing to prod, another one could be pointing to beta. One of them, they could both be pointing to prod with different queries. So I'm sure this is a concept you all understand, but I just want to get a verbal yes from everybody that yes, we are all on the same page, that instantiating different classes means that we've got different actual versions of the same thing. You guys understand that?
Yep.
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay, good. Now we can go on. Okay, so I'm going to create a PowerShell script. Okay, so to create a class, it's actually not that hard. If I come here and say function query SQL, and I've got my rounds, I've got my curlies. That's a good basic outline for a function. So now I'm just going to say class instead of function, and I'm going to take away my rounds. So now everything inside of here is the function. I mean, is the class, right? You don't really pass parameters into classes. You pass parameters into the methods of those classes. So methods are really just functions inside the class. Now, everything inside this class is going to be, how do we put it? Self-contained, right? So the model of scope is really big inside classes. So let's do this. We're going to start out with properties. So I've got this class that has nothing in it so far. Now, if I were to create a property, and I'm just going to give myself a little note here that says, with the thing. There we go. Properties. And so the first thing inside the class, at the very top, inside the curlies, is going to be your properties. And all you really have to do is list them. So right now, I'm going to, not with that, with that. So I'm going to say string And since we're doing a connection class, let's call this constring, except it needs to be a parameter. Hold on one sec. Okay, I had to stop the noise. So I'm going to do constring, and I'm going to do server name just because I can. Not you. There we go. And what did I say? Server name. There we go. So I've got a class with two properties. I'm not entirely sure if I can instantiate a class without any methods at all, but I'm pretty sure I can because there's an automatic method that's put in there, but I'm going to give it a shot anyway. So I've got to save this first. So this is fine. I'll say SQL class. Good. Now at the bottom of here, since this is just a SQL script and I'm just defining this class, then I can call the class too, right? So I can just say SQL call equals, will you stop that? Let's see what I want to call, square brackets, and then query SQL, because a class instantiation goes inside square brackets. And then new, like that. Okay? So I'm going to save that. Let's just see if we can run this without any errors. And we did. So it didn't do anything, right? But if I turn around now and say SQL call, and let's pipe that to a GM, shall we?
Yeah.
Now you can see, let me raise this up a little bit, that I've got an actual object. The type is query SQL because that's the type I gave it up here. And I've got these two properties, constring and server name. Get and set. Now it's starting to look really familiar, right? So you also notice that we've got these methods that we did not create. PowerShell tacks these on automatically. There's no way to stop it. Why would you want to? But that's it, right? So it tacks these on by itself. So good for that. Now, so now we've got our first properties. Now we have to learn how to set them and kind of do something with them, right? So let's create a couple more properties just so we can be complete when our example is done here. And we're going to create our first method as well. So let's see. Let's do DB name. So I'll do DB name, username, and password. I'll just come here, DB name, username, and password. Cool. So I'm going to save these guys. So now I've got enough to hopefully get started. So since we're doing our class on connections, it only seems right that we start with the connection string, right? We always want a good connection string. So let's go ahead and say methods. Perfect. So now anything under here that's not a property, and again, properties are just lists of variables, right, is a method. And for our first method, we're going to call it connection string, might as well. And there are a couple differences to the way you usually do things, but it's going to look really familiar to the definition in get member. So we start off with our return type. For the connection string, what's our return type going to be? Anybody know? String, right? Connection string, it's in the name, right? So let's call this connection string. Yeah. There we go. Now, you do pass values to methods, right? And what do we need for our connection string? Oh, we need server name, DB name, username, and password, right? Funny that those are the very things that we've got up top. So where are we going to get these? Usually from our main script, right? So we've got an include that has the username and password and whatnot and server name that we want to connect to and the database name, right? So this works the same way as the function I've already given you guys. And we're going to put those parameters up at the top. But they're just going to be used differently here slightly. So I'm just going to put those guys right in here. So nothing too outer space with this, right? String, connection name, so on and so on. So now I've got my connection string method. And now, anybody want to bet there are curlies involved in this? Absolutely. So now I've got my curlies. And I'm going to paste the code from my function. And let's see if I can find that guy. I've got it up here somewhere. Ah, there it is. So I'm just going to take this whole thing right here and copy it. And then I'm going to paste it right in here. There we go. So this isn't very useful yet because it works for the function, but it doesn't work for what we've got now. So we've got to change some of these parameters to equal what we've got in our class. So let me stop real quick and ask, is everybody still okay with what's going on here? Or are you behind? Do I need to clarify anything? I'll take your silence as reassuring. However, I will say, if anything at all jumps out at you that you don't understand, shout it out. All right? Otherwise, I'm just going to keep going. And if you don't understand this, it's your fault, not mine. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do, clearly I set the string to null. Now I have to work with these guys. And now is a good time probably to talk about this. There's a built-in parameter called this, just like we have the built-in null and true and false, right? And so this dot, and I'll show you that soon. And by the way, we got this red line on here because you're required to use return. Watch, the red line will go away in a few seconds because I said that this returns a string right here, right? Connection string returns a string. This is the return type, which means I have to return. I can't just put string like I can in a function, and it'll automatically just give that back to me. You have to have return. It's mandatory. Now, what if I didn't want to return anything? What would I put here? What if I just wanted this function to do something and not return any data to me? What would I put in there? Anybody? Think back to your GM. Think back to your definition in GM.
Void.
Void, yes. If I didn't want it to return anything, void. Very good. Okay. Change that back to string. So, and there are some things that you're going to void, that you just want to go away and do something and then not return anything back. That's fine. So, back to this. I have to set this. So I've got this set to con server name. And I've got it set to DB name right there, username, and password. So all of these guys are going to use what we pass into that. So let me see if there's something let me think if there's something else I need to teach you before I move on to this next bit. No, there's not, because we're usually not going to call, at least in this version of it, we're not going to call connection string by itself. We're going to let other methods call connection string. But we can get a connection string back from this. So I'm just going to save this real quick. And how do I call that? I call it like this. I've instantiated this new instance of query SQL, right? So right now I've got a blank frame of a car. And now I just call it. So now I just say SQL call dot, and you see there, it even shows up in the thing. So now I just need, let's pass it some hard-coded values for now. I'll say localhost, and I'll say minion, and let's say SSPI and SSPI. So with any luck, I get my connection string back. And you see this right here automatically tells me that I'm working on a new instance of query SQL. So this ties this back automatically to the object that I've got. And you know what? I only have to use it once. By the time we're finished, I'm only going to have to do it once, right? So let's do something. Let's take something here and use a little bit more finesse, I guess you will. Let's make this a little bit more useful, and let's actually query a table, which means we're going to need another method, and possibly even more than that. So for right now, let me see. Yeah, let's just stick with that. So right now, we're going to, let me close this guy. We're going to create another method, and let's call it get table data, I guess. So just right underneath this method here, we're going to say, and what do we want to return with get table data? So going back to our functions before, right, we're going to return something. We're going to return what do you call it? The data adapter, right? We fill the data adapter, right? And then we're going to pass back the dataset.tables, right? So I don't expect you to know this particular one, but we are going to pass back. Let me just copy this. Oops, I'll get one space between there. So we're going to pass back the system data table collection type. So you can see right there. And we're going to name this get table data, and we're going to pass in the query. Beautiful. So I'm passing in the query, and I'm going to put in a whole bunch of this stuff here, right there. And I'm just going to paste in the stuff. This is mostly from the function. So I've explained this to every one of you guys, what this connection stuff is all about. So we're not going to concentrate on that right now. You should at least tangentially understand what all this stuff means. But what we do have here is this dot query equals query. So here's what we're doing. Let me see what this is complaining about. Oh, I know what it's complaining about. I didn't put in my curlies. We can't forget the curlies, right? And curly number 2. There we go. Okay, so got my curlies in. And what are you complaining about now? Right, see? It's complaining about the return, right? We'll get to the return. So this dot query equals query. And you notice how query is what I'm passing in. When I say this, it means this instantiation of this class. So this isn't for anybody else. It's just for this instantiation of the class. And so this dot query is being set from the query we're passing in. And what we're doing is, I don't have it here yet, setting the query. So let's go ahead and add that in here. We'll say query. So now we've got a query property that we are going to be able to bring up, because the first thing we do when we pass in this query and run this method, get table data, the first thing we do is we're going to set the class property of the current query, so that not only can we use it in any other method we want to, we don't have to keep passing it around in our code, right? But now we can also use that in our call down here, right? When we call this one down here, if there's a problem with the query, we can just print the query to the screen and take a look at it and see if anything's wrong with it. So that's the first advantage of this, is you don't have to go in and mess with your function, right? So in a function, if you were going to do this, right, you would have to go inside the function and specifically print that query, right? Or if you have it as a variable, then you would have to dot source it and then print it like that, right? But here you can just call the property. Show me SQL call.query, and I can take a look at it. Because if I were building this query inside of here dynamically, it's very possible. In fact, on the first couple tries, it's probable that you're going to mess something up and it's not going to be exactly what you want. So it's really, really easy to be able to come in here and print it just like this printed, and look at that and all the other properties of your connection that we're going to get to in just a second. Is everybody still with me? I'm going to save this while I got it. Any questions at all? I told you this is a thick topic.
Following.
Okay, excellent. So, and you better hope you're following, because you're going to do this. So, when, and of course I got my error action preference set to stop. So let me ask you this. V, what does this line do?
This line sets up the query variable to the instance of this particular this dot query means instance of this particular class. So the query is assigned to you can say we are making instance of the query over here.
Right. So language is important here, right? So we're setting the property for this instance, right?
Right.
So we're setting the query property. And Michael, what is this? What does this tell me?
This is the type of the query. Hold on. Yes, this is the type of the this type of the gettable data. This.
So what the words you're looking for, I can tell you understand it, but the words you're looking for are it's the return type for the method.
It's a return time, yes, for the method.
That's
for
the type of data
table data method. Thank you.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, beautiful. And Prashant, what's all this about?
Properties of the class.
Okay. Excellent. That was an easy one, right? Because it says properties right above it, but you know. Okay.
Oh,
Okay. And where are properties allowed to be defined? That's still you.
Within the class.
Where can you define properties? At the top of the class.
Okay. Yep.
Right? I couldn't come in here and define properties down here in between methods, right?
True. Yes.
Properties, then methods. Excellent. Okay, so V, what is one difference between a method and a function? We talked about like a really, really big difference.
Right. So method can return some values.
So can a function.
Method function does a specific task.
So does a function.
And
Michael, you're up. What's one of the big differences between a method and a function?
Well, first of all, function. That's a good question. Function difference.
Prashant, you're up.
You can define function. I mean, you can create function yourself, right? And the method. I mean, in the class you can see. Well, yeah.
Nope.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Nope. Stop. Prashant, you're up.
Okay.
Both can return. Both can return values. The difference is printing or calling the function is.
Nope. The method has to have a return, right?
Okay.
You can't just say string at the end, and you can't say, you can't say something like write host or something. I mean, you can, but if it returns something, if it has a return in here, then it has to have a return, whereas a function will just let you do this, right?
Yep.
So that's the big difference right now between those two, is we have to have a return statement. Okay, very nice. So we are writing our get table data, and you see that's what that's complaining about here, right? That all code paths don't return a value within the method. Well, right now none of them do. We've told it to return us a data table collection, but we don't have any return at all yet. That's fine. So we've got this con string, and that's what we're doing now. Is we're taking the connection string that we've already created. So here, where is it? We've got this con string, and we're passing these guys into the con string. But remember I said that we're not going to call the con string manually, which means that this guy has to call con string. And that's what we're doing. I'm taking this local variable inside this function, this local function variable, and I'm setting it equal to the instance's property of constring. You got that? Because I'm going to set it, I might as well use it. Otherwise, what's the point in setting it if you're not going to use it everywhere, right? So now for this instance of this class, I don't have to change or pass the connection string ever again, because now I've got it saved as a property for this instance, and everything in there can read these, everything inside the class can read those properties. So think of it as like your own little storage area, right? Your own little private storage area. So this dot query equals query. I'm setting the property. Connection string equals this connection string. I'm reading the property. And now look, just a couple little minor things. Connection equals this connection string. Very nice. You know, I set that here, but I could have just as easily have, and I could have just as easily used that here, right? So I've got the connection string here, but I'm not really using it, right? I'm using it directly from the thing. So I need to pick one or the other, don't I? Now, for here, I'm using the query that was passed in. I'm setting it here so I could use this query, but I'm passing it in directly, so I might as well use it directly. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm setting this so the end user can see it if they need to. And so I could have used it down here, or I could just be putting it in there for the user. Either one is good. So now the question comes, if I am not calling connection string manually, then how does this guy get the connection string? Because all I'm going to do at the bottom of here, let me do this. All I'm going to do at the bottom of here is instantiate my class and call my get table data method. So I shouldn't have to ever deal with connection string manually unless I want to, right? So how does this translate into this, right? The answer is what we call constructors. And this is an easy concept to employ, and it's also difficult as well, right? It's a little bit of both. So a constructor is code that gets run automatically when you instantiate a class, right? So the default constructor takes no parameters. And I don't have to define a default constructor, because you see I haven't. But so because PowerShell will, or I'll say .NET will create that constructor for you. So in other words, by default constructor, I mean when I come here and call this, you notice how I didn't call it with any parameters, because it's only got a default constructor, as in there is no constructor here. In fact, let me collapse these guys to clean this up a little bit. There we go. So I've got two methods, and neither one of them are constructors. So it uses the default constructor, and it doesn't do anything when you call it, right? Basically, you've just got an empty object. It's like you've built a vase, and that's it, right? There's nothing inside of it, no properties, it hasn't been baked, it hasn't been shellacked or anything, right? It hasn't been enameled. It's just boom. It's just a plain old vase, and that's it, right? So an empty object, and that was the first one we created, wasn't it? When we created those properties initially and just pulled them up and they were just properties listed and there was nothing else there. That's what you get when you have a default constructor. Just nothing. But we want to do stuff sometimes when we create a class, right? We want to have some stuff done for us automatically when we create a class sometimes. What are some of the things we would want to have done automatically? Set some properties maybe, right? Now, again, I said you don't have to, right? And you don't. You really, really don't have to instantiate anything when you create a class. You could create an empty class and then come in here and create and fill all the properties yourself. So I could say something like SQL call dot query equals, oops, come on, equals blank, right? And then I could say query call dot server name equals blank, and then DB name equals blank, and username equals. So I could instantiate a completely empty class and come in here and fill in all of these properties manually. That sounds like a lot of BS though, doesn't it? So instead of doing that, I'm going to do some stuff automatically. Now to create a constructor, really simple. All you have to do is have a method with the same name as the class. So a constructor is just another method. And let's take a look at the constructor we're going to create, and we're going to walk ourselves through it. Now, they can be in any order, but I like constructors to be at the top. So here I've got class constructors. Woohoo! And inside this, and what does this constructor take? Server, database name, username, password. So I'm going to be able to have all of that stuff in there, right? And what does it do first? It sets the property server name to what I just passed in. It sets the current DB name property to the one I passed in, current username, and so on, right? And then what does it do? It sets the connection string by calling the connection string method itself and passes in these guys that I've already passed in. So by the time we create this, by the time I call get table data, I have created new here, and I have passed it in all of these guys. So I'm going to kill that, and I'm going to put that up here. Because now I've got a constructor that takes these guys. Do you understand? Okay, I'll take that as a yes. So I haven't lost anybody now. So now when I create my method, or yeah, when I create my new instance of my class, I pass it in this data, and it automatically sets all of these properties. And it sets the connection string property equal to the connection string method. So it calls this method, builds a connection string, returns that string back to here, and then sets that equal to this. Beautiful. And I can do all of that from the comfort of my own home, right? So let's do this. Let's not even call this guy. And let's comment all this out because I don't want to do the return yet. So let me comment all this guy out right here, save it, and with any luck, I didn't blow anything up. And do I have, is that hard-coded? Yeah, that's hard-coded. Good. So now, and of course I blew something up because it's not
the last line.
data.
It's hash. Yeah.
Oh, hash. There we go. Good catch. Let's try this again. So now it did nothing, right? But now let's do this. Let's say, no. There we go. Now let's just take a look at the SQL call object. And you can see that I've got my connection string, server name, database name. So I've filled in these properties automatically. Well, not automatically, right? I had to do it, but I filled them all in. Query isn't set yet because that's set inside the method that we've commented out. So this gets us into overloads, right? So let's say that I want to have another constructor, maybe, that keeps everything the same and let's say it just passes in username and password, right? Or let's say that it passes in server name. Yeah, let's do server name, right? So everything else is going to stay the same. So I want to look at the minion database on every server because, you know, little propaganda here, right? So I've got one overload here, and I'm just going to copy this guy. I'm going to try to collapse it if I can. There we go. And so I've got that, and I'm going to copy that, come right below it, and put another one with the exact same name. And I'm going to get rid of everything else here except server name, which means that now DB name would have to be equal to something hard-coded, right? Minion. And let's mix this up a little bit. Let's say Sean, and password is going to be my password. And so now this stuff changes, doesn't it? So now I've got to change all this, and let's just go ahead and make this right here. There, and password. There we go. So now I can call this one of two different ways, right? I can call this by either, I can instantiate this class by passing in everything, or I can instantiate it just by passing it the server because everything else is going to be the same. So let's do that now. Actually, I'm going to copy this whole thing right there, and then I'll just kill everything else. And let me kill this one. Aha, I did a hash this time. So now I've got all my new data, right? And I can pass this in here and say my server. And now I've got my server, and everything else stays the same. And if I do a GM on this, then I can see connection string. I can see all my properties. I can see my connection string method, right? But where is my thing here? I think you get... I thought I would be able to see my overloads in here. But it looks like I need to... I think there's another way to get overloads on your classes like this. For the constructor, that is what I'm trying to say. So I'll have to look up how to see the constructors, because I think you have to see the constructors differently. But if I wanted to have a connection string overload, all I would have to do is create another method with the name connection string and a different parameter set, and I would have that connection string overload as well. So let's see that play out just for a second. I'm not going to really go out of my way to like super explain this, but let's just say this. Let's just kill that and make server name, and we're going to put everything else equal to this dot. So I'm just going to do this dot. And okay, does anybody know why this isn't parsing properly? Shouldn't I have the nice little thing that I have here, right? The nice little color coding that I have here. How come it's not color coding properly here? Nobody knows? I would imagine that it would be an interpolation issue. Right?
Yeah.
I've explained this in detail to everybody, so y'all should have gotten this. But I'm going to...
I was losing my thought.
I'm going to kill the rest of this because I don't feel like doing the rest of it. But let's just assume that all that stuff is there, and we're just going to make the string this. Is everybody okay with that? Good. So now I've got that. And I can come in here and I see my connection string, and I can see my overload as well. So this really brings it home for you when you do a get member on something, what overloads are and how they're created and all of that. So it really helps understand the definition portion of the methods when you do a GM, right? So I'm going to kill this overload because we don't need it. And you can have clearly as many overloads as you want. I could have, 12 connection string overloads if I wanted to, and it would be just fine. Including if I wanted this whole thing to handle different database types, right? I could put in an overload for Oracle and an overload for MySQL and so on and so on. And you can put a flag in there that says Oracle, for database type, or you could flag it some other way. So, there's a number of ways that you could do this for different connection strings, for different overloads. And that's a really good use case for overloads, is something like that. So, back to our main thing here. And I'm going to kill
I have
this.
a question.
Yes.
Yeah, so we have suppose two different overloads we have seen over here, right? For connection string or for the other constructor. So
Yes.
when we are calling it, calling it, so how do we come to know that this is having two different overloads, or this is having three different overloads, or how many parameters I need to pass?
That's what get members for. Right? That's what we're doing down here. I can see that connection string has this first overload that takes 1, 2, 3, 4 parameters. And this next one takes, so far it only takes one that we can see, right? But so we would have to format this as a list to be able to see it. So let me do this. GM, pipe that to format list. And so now, let's go to the very top. You can see connection string here. So connection string here is a method. This takes the 4 overloads, and the other overload is, where the hell is the other overload? And there's all my properties. Let me do it this way instead. Where stop it. Geez, why can't I type? Here we go. Get my curlies, and I'll say name equals method. I think that's right. Oh, member type. That's what it is. Member type equals method. So I get this toString, and I get my connection string there, and I should be seeing the other overload here, and I don't know why I'm not, because I see it when it's not there, when it's not being formatted to a list. So yeah, that's usually how I solve that, is I come in here and I format it as a list, and I can see all the overloads. Huh.
Okay.
Or did I? Oh, I already deleted that overload. That's the problem. So here, let me do
Yeah.
this then. Let me copy this and put that overload back. I would do a Control Z, but I've already changed stuff down here at the bottom, so I can't. And now let's just kill all this stuff here. Right? And now I just want to do this guy. So I'll come up here and I'll say this.db name. Copy that. And I'll come back here. Oh, there it is. And of course, I have to do this. That. And let's kill this one too. Because at the very least, we want it to compile. There we go. And there's our second overload.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, and the second overload doesn't have to, as far as I know, doesn't have to even return the same type. As long as it's got the same name, you can do all kinds of things in this, right? So, yeah, that's how you would see the second overload if it runs off the screen and the last one, right? And then if it's even worse than that, there are things you can do to format this a little bit better, right? And you could put them all in an array and line them all up on this side and stuff like that if it gets really bad. But yeah, that's how you see all the different overloads, and you just pick one, right? Well, I know that I want to connect to the default username and password and the default database. All I have to do is change the server name, so I'm going to use this one, right? Or I'm going to start a completely different one from everything else, so I'm going to call this one and pass in all of the things, right? So you get to decide that based off of your needs. And the cool thing about writing your own classes is you get to define the constructors and the methods based off of your own needs. How you like to work, how you specifically need this to work. But seeing this really drives home overloads, right? And properties and whatnot. It really drives home how this stuff works. Now, if I remember rightly, we were actually going to query a table eventually. So let's go ahead and bring this guy back. And this is the last thing we're going to do today is get this method working. Because this is already a lot of info, right? So let me see. Before I break into this, Michael, where can you define properties inside a class? Struggling with this phone again.
So I'm here, sorry. We can define properties in the class. Well, can you scroll up, please? The properties. Yes, we have to define properties in the beginning of the class. So it's right here at the top.
Right. Exactly. V. If you want to overload a method, what type of name do you have to give it?
The name should be same.
Yes, exactly.
For both the methods, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
Prashant, what's a constructor?
If we don't want the class to be called,
Nope.
I mean, if
Very simply, it's a method that gets called when you instantiate the class. Right?
Yeah.
Excellent. Yep. And how many constructors can you have?
We have default, and we can create any number of.
Yeah, as many as you want.
Yeah.
Right? Excellent. Okay, so we've got overloads out of the way very nicely as well. So I'm going to collapse this guy here because I don't need him anymore because we're already building our connection string, right? So I don't need that anymore. All I'm going to do is pass in a query here. So I'm doing all of this stuff And so now I just need to return. And what am I going to return? My table, right? So let me grab that code because it's just easier. Cool. So I'm going to put a couple lines here, and I'm going to return dataset tables. I haven't closed my connection yet, so let me do that real quick. There we go. So all this is the standard code that we're used to querying. I take the query, blah, 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 all that stuff, right? So let's go ahead and call this. So let's get rid of all these guys. Let's get rid of this guy too. We don't need him anymore. Let's instantiate with everything we need. Let's call, and what do we need to pass this? A query. So we'll say select star from sys databases. And of course, this isn't following good practice, right? What would be a good practice for this? How would we do this in real life? How would we do this in real life?
We define a query in a variable and then pass that variable.
Exactly. Every one of you should have gotten that one right away. You should have been fighting to answer that one. Okay. And of course we made a mistake. The term new is not recognized as the name of a commandlet function. Exactly. So we've got new here. And let's see what we did wrong. I may have a rogue thing still hanging out there. Yes, I do. So the thing is, actually, let me just do this. Let me kill this guy. Ah, still not. What did I do wrong? New, blah, blah, blah. Call get table. See, it's cool when stuff like this happens because you get to see the troubleshooting. Did I mess something up inside of here? Nope, doesn't look like it. Let me see real quick. My constructor. Does anybody see what I may have done wrong? I'm returning that. I've got that. I don't have any arrows. I'm looking to see if I've accidentally deleted something I needed. Okay, I got my constructor there. I still have that problem. Let me see. What did I mess up? It's here somewhere. SQL call equals SQL blah, blah. New. Huh. It should be good. Oh. Well, maybe. What's that? Taking that, and that. Huh. Does anybody see what I did? Because right now I don't have any errors. And nothing is... I've got my constructor. Got that. Let me do this. I just want to test something real quick. Okay, so I think what I need here, let me do that, is let me create a default blank constructor. Shouldn't need that, but let me see what happens when I copy this guy here. And kill everything inside of here. So this is your blank default constructor that gets created automatically. Do I have new somewhere weird? Do this.
By some chance, it's double quote there, 77 line. It's a mix of both double quote and single quotes. Yeah,
No,
around
no.
the local host. Okay.
They're both double quotes. Yeah, they're double quotes.
Yeah, they are double quotes, but for the minion and SSPI, it's
Yeah, that's the way we that's the way we've done it the whole time. They're all strings.
Yeah.
What did I do to this? So tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to comment stuff until something behaves. See, I knew I didn't need that. One, two, three, four. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just looking to see where I could have broken something. All my other methods are gone. Let me get rid of this. Does not contain a method called connection string. Okay. So let's bring connection string back. Stop that. There we go. All right, so I got that. And so when all else fails, just go right back and start fixing stuff, right? Let's comment this guy. Uncomment this guy. And I'm beginning to see where our issue might be. Okay. Line 60. This.const string. Let's do this. Still at 60. Oh. Okay. I think. Yes. That's my problem. We ended up adding spaces to our new objects. Aha, that's our problem. Wow, it should take nowhere near this long. Beautiful. Okay, so it timed out trying to get to local host. Am I on the right server? Oh, I am on the wrong server. Let's try that. Nope, sorry. It's going to time out again because I meant to say Come on, dude, that's you. It's not going to do anything until it times out again. Wrong server again. I do that. But you guys know that, don't you? There we go. Okay. Let's try that. New again in line 64. Somehow we did something that got rid of all these new objects and put a space in there. I don't know how. Okay. So we at least didn't fail this time, but it should have given us our table data. So I'm opening, I'm getting that, I'm closing. Let's do this. Oh. Ha ha ha. Anybody see what I did wrong? Let's fill that data set, shall we? And I can see all that data there. Let's pretty it up a little bit. I could set that to a parameter, or I can just format table. There we go. And there's sys databases. Now, if I want to run this again and just pass it SQL call and look at the objects and see what all I've got, then I can see the query that I ran. I can see the data source. I can see server name, database, all that stuff. It's right there as object properties. So we're going to stop there today. That little jaunt into new object was disturbing, but it's good to see that things can go wrong and how to look at them. It gives you the line number, right? You should be able to find it from the line number. So, does anybody have any questions or concerns? I'll take that as a no. Cool. And everybody's on board with this? Because we're not going to have another class tomorrow. And after that is Christmas break. So you've got all of next week to go over this video and, you know, really solidify these concepts and try them out on your own on different things. Everybody good?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
You sound really confident there, V. Okay.
Yeah, I have Christmas songs, you know, just piercing my ears since this morning, so it's really hard to concentrate, to be honest. A lot of kids in the house, so, but yeah,
Right.
I'm with you, Sean.
Well, good thing it's on video, huh? So
yeah, that's true.
So what do you guys have for, actually, let me stop the recording.